You just ran the best free training of your life. 60 people showed up. The chat filled with hearts and thank yous, and somebody typed, "This is the clearest explanation I have ever seen." Somebody else said you should be charging for this. Then you check the sales page. 2 enrollments, maybe 3. I am Lei, and this is Bullish Books. If that made your stomach drop, you already know the gap I want to talk about today, because I teach technical material online, and I have lived on both sides of it. The distance between people loved that and people bought that is not a small gap. It is a canyon, and the explanation everyone reaches for first, that you need to become a better teacher, is almost always wrong. The teaching was fine. The teaching was often excellent. Something else broke. So today I want to give you my working model of what actually broke. By the end of this episode, you will understand why free trainings produce gratitude. Instead of customers, you will have the 4-part architecture underneath every online presentation that actually sells, and you will know where most educators leave the majority of their money sitting on the floor. Let me start with what the thing even is. A webinar is a scheduled online presentation where one person teaches a live audience and then makes an offer. That description is useless because it fits the ones that work and the ones that fail equally well. Here is the definition that changes how you build one. A webinar is a sales letter that happens to be spoken out loud in real time to many people at once. Sit with that, because once you accept it, everything reorganizes. A sales letter has an argument that moves from the first line to the last. Every paragraph is load-bearing. Nobody has ever written one by thinking, I will just share some really useful stuff and see what happens. And yet that is exactly how most of us build our free trainings. Why does this format have such power for people selling education? It compresses the sales cycle. A stranger who would normally need 7 to 10 days of nurture emails can go from cold to purchased in about 90 minutes. That is why I call this the 2-hour sales cycle. And it lets you teach and sell in the same sitting. Buying decisions are emotional, and emotions are felt in the moment, not next Thursday. If you help someone finally understand their own problem and then, while that clarity is still hot, show them the fastest path through it, you are not interrupting the education. You are completing it. It also feels like an event, which matters enormously. Figures published through Zoom this year put live webinar conversion at roughly 63%, while the on-demand version of the same content converts at around 19%. Same slides, same words, 3 times the result, purely from presence. This is not universally correct, whatever the marketing blogs say. If you are selling a $27 ebook, it is overkill. Where it wins is higher priced offers, and one category worth underlining for anyone who teaches a real skill: products whose superiority is not obvious. If you teach bioinformatics or Excel or statistics, your problem was never that people doubt the subject is valuable. It is that they cannot tell your course apart from the 11,000 free tutorials competing for their attention. 45 minutes of you actually teaching solves that in a way no sales page ever will. Okay, so how do you build one? Every presentation worth studying has the same 4 sections in the same order, and not because of tradition, because each one sets up the next. 1, the introduction. Hook them and establish that you are a credible source of the solution they want in roughly 10 minutes. 2, the content. Demonstrate a solution exists and works while getting them to commit out loud to using it. 3, the transition. Connect what they just learned to something they can invest in. That is the shortest section and the one almost everybody skips. 4, the close. Make the case that what you are offering is worth far more than it costs. Here is the part that surprised me. The order is chronological, but the construction is not. You cannot write an introduction to something that does not exist yet, because its job is to foreshadow the content and pre-sell the offer. So you build the content first, then the close, then the introduction, and the transition dead last. And you build in 3 passes: shippable, meaning good enough to put in front of a human being; polished, where you ask what emotion they should be feeling right here and whether they actually are; and recalibrated, which only happens after contact with a real audience. That third pass is where the money is, and here is the story that proves it. In 2010, Jason Fladlien, whose book One to Many gave me the theory I am building on here, sold a WordPress tool on a live presentation at $67. He was certain it would crush. He finished having sold about $5,000 worth, but because it was live, he could see the exact moment the audience got lost. They were excited, then they hit a technical explanation and got confused, and a confused mind does not say yes. He and his partner spent a few hours fixing that one section, ran it again to the same audience that had already declined, and did over $100,000. Same product, same price, same people, one section rewritten. I love that story because it locates the failure so precisely. The product was not wrong, the market was not wrong, one paragraph of explanation was wrong, and it cost 95% of the revenue. And you will never find that paragraph by staring at your slides. You find it by watching a chat window. Let us build the pieces, starting with the introduction, which has 5 jobs to do in about 10 minutes. Think about an uncle who is broke, twice divorced, badly out of shape, and absolutely full of life advice. He might be right about everything he says. You will not listen to a word of it because he is incongruent with his own advice. Your audience walks in holding some version of that suspicion about you. Most people attend a free session because they are stuck and previous solutions failed them, which means the room is full of quiet cynicism, whether or not anyone types it into the chat. Job 1 is closing that credibility gap fast. Show a result you have personally achieved that is unusual, and pair a historical one with a recent one, because historical proves you can do it, and recent proves you still can. Then, testimonials, which is where almost everyone underperforms. Most presenters dump them into the pitch in one long block and read them in a monotone. 5 testimonials in the first 5 minutes is a better standard, and here is the technique inside the technique. Do not finish the testimonial. Show the screenshot, quote the striking phrase, and move on before the story resolves. If it mentions 7 figures in sales and a new car in the driveway, and you never explain how your audience is carrying an open question, bring that person back in the content, then again in the close. One testimonial used 3 times stops being social proof and starts being a story. I want to name something for those of us in academic or technical fields, because this part is genuinely uncomfortable. Everything in scientific training pushes toward understatement. You learn to hedge, to say these data suggest. That instinct is correct in a paper and actively harmful here because your audience is not evaluating your epistemic humility. They are deciding in about 90 seconds whether you are worth the next hour of their life. Job 2 is the one I never would have predicted. Early on, you ask the audience to type something into the chat, not say hi, something that commits them to a stance. You describe what you are about to give them, then ask for something in return, that they will not passively absorb this, that they will picture themselves using it. And then you say, do not just nod, type yes in the chat right now. It feels far too small to matter. It is not. Jonathan Freedman and Scott Fraser published the foundational experiment in 1966. They asked homeowners in Palo Alto to put a large, genuinely ugly, drive carefully billboard on their front lawn. Asked cold, about 17% agreed. But when researchers first asked a much smaller favor, displaying a small "Be a Safe Driver" sticker, then came back later with the billboard request, compliance jumped to roughly 76%. A tiny prior yes quadrupled the rate of a much larger one, because people infer what they believe by watching what they do, and refusing that second request would now be inconsistent with who they just became. Every yes you collect makes the next yes easier, and the final yes is, I will buy this. Collecting 100 small agreements before you ask for money is not a trick bolted onto the presentation. It is the presentation, running underneath the teaching the entire time. Let me be direct about the ethics, because this is where a lot of educators flinch, and I flinch too. Yes, This is influence. Anybody who claims selling does not involve persuasion is playing word games. The honest question is whether you are influencing them towards something that will actually help them. If your course works and someone talks themselves out of it because of vague fear, you have not protected them. You have just let them stay stuck politely. Job 3 is killing objections before they form, because if you wait for the pitch, you have given the objection 90 minutes to grow roots. Name your 3 biggest out loud, early, and soften the wording as you do. You may be wondering whether this applies to your situation, lands better than "you are probably worried you cannot do this." Then reframe. Moving someone from "can I do this" to "will this time be different" shifts the frame from a verdict on their competence to a question about the method, and the second question is one you can answer. Job 4 is giving them a future worth wanting, because solving a problem is not motivating if the world still looks grey once it is gone. So you take them on a guided jump forward in time, not imagine being successful, which is too abstract to feel like anything. What does a Tuesday look like? What are you no longer worried about? What did you finally have time to do? This is the same thing good teaching does anyway. The best moment in any technical course is when a student stops asking, "How do I run this command?" and starts asking, "What should I investigate next?" because they have seen far enough ahead to want something. And job 5 is opening loops you do not close. People can shut the tab at any second, and a promise of something specific you deliberately do not deliver yet is what holds attention across that gap. Write your tease slide last, 4 to 6 bullets, that promise a benefit while hiding the mechanism. The mistake that happens in the 5th minute of most technical talks. The single change that doubles how fast your analysis runs. Now the content section, which takes the longest to build and, counterintuitively, matters least for the sale. In a 90-minute session, it might run 50 minutes. Most runtime, least closing power. Here is why. You know your subject deeply. You want to be generous. So instead of teaching 1 method, you teach 4, because more is more. Wrong. And there is a famous experiment about exactly this. In 2000, Sheena Iyengar and Mark Lepper set up a tasting booth at a grocery store in Menlo Park. Some hours it displayed 6 varieties of jam. Other hours, 24. The big display drew more traffic. About 60% of shoppers stopped versus 40. But of the people who stopped at the 24 jam table, roughly 3% bought a jar. At the 6 jam table, roughly 30% did. 10 times the conversion from a quarter of the options. One honest caveat because I would want somebody to flag it for me. A 2010 meta-analysis by Benjamin Scheibehenne and colleagues found the average choice overload effect across all contexts sits near 0. It is real but conditional, showing up most strongly when options are hard to tell apart, when the stakes feel high, and when the chooser has no expertise in the category, which describes your audience exactly. They do not want a comprehensive map of the territory. They want relief. Give them 1 clear path they can picture themselves walking and they move. Give them 4, and they will spend the rest of the session deciding which one, which means they are doing homework instead of buying. The subtler version of this mistake is confusing information transfer with value. You can deliver the best explanation your audience has ever heard and sell nothing, because knowing something and feeling something about it are different states. So your cutting criteria should be emotional, not informational. What state does this slide put them in? Confidence or confusion? The question I keep coming back to is one I learned as a teacher, not a marketer. Give me 2 students with identical material, one who feels capable and one who feels intimidated, and the capable one wins every time regardless of raw ability. Managing that feeling is the actual job, and most presenters leave it to chance. So, practically, before you write a single slide, finish this sentence. By the end of this session, this specific audience will achieve this specific result, and it will feel this specific way. Narrower is easier. Anyone who wants to learn data analysis is nearly impossible to serve in an hour. Wet lab biologists who have never opened a terminal is a target you can hit, because now every example and every objection can be aimed at one person. And the test for whether your outcome is any good. Can you deliver it in 45 to 60 minutes? If not, you picked the wrong outcome, not the wrong time limit. Then break the path into steps. No fewer than 3, no more than 5. And show the map and keep showing it. Put the steps on a slide, and after each one, show that same slide with the step marked complete. This kills confusion, which is the emotion most lethal to a sale, and it makes the whole thing look manageable. 4 steps. That is the entire method. An audience that can see the edges of a body of knowledge feels capable of acquiring it, and an audience that feels capable buys. Inside each step, there is a pattern I now use in teaching generally. Context, vision, commitment, strategy. Establish why the step matters. Make them see themselves doing it. Get them to affirm it out loud, then teach the actual how. And spend roughly a third of your content time on step 1 alone, because if you lose them there, you have lost them entirely. Which brings me to the section that is almost universally missing, and it lasts about 90 seconds. The transition is the moment you stop teaching and start selling, and people skip it because it feels like a betrayal. But everything before this point genuinely was valuable, and nobody was defrauded. What is actually happening is that selling is confrontational. Confrontation invites rejection, and rejection is unpleasant. The discomfort is about you, not them. Which is exactly why the transition exists. It serves the presenter more than the audience, as a mechanism for arriving at the pitch confident instead of apologetic. And confidence is audible. 3 moves. First, recap with velocity. 60 minutes in 60 seconds. Fire off 10 to 20 things they now possess, spoken as though they already own them. Not, we discussed how to select tools, but you now have a method for selecting tools that most people in your field will never learn. Outcomes, not topics. Second, collect 6 yeses. Do you feel more confident than you did an hour ago? Are you glad you came? Would you like to go further than 1 session allows? That last one does the real work, because the answer is yes, and the only way to act on it is to buy. Third, present 2 choices. And this is a deliberate false dilemma, so let me be transparent about that. You say, before today, I had 2 options. Share what I know, wish you luck, and hope you figure out the rest alone, or take real responsibility for whether this works in your life, which means building something that goes further. I chose the second. Then you name the product. There were obviously more than 2 options, and that is the point. The construction forces the comparison you want. Now the close. Good news first. It is the most formulaic section, so you can assemble one that works by following the order. Offer, price, bonuses, guarantee, objections. The offer is the least important part, and most presenters believe the opposite, and it shows. 20 minutes walking through every module, every worksheet. It is very hard to bore someone into buying. Everything they receive is a feature. What it does for them is the benefit. Nobody wants a drill. The price comes early, within the first 5 minutes of the offer section, because until people know the number, they cannot evaluate anything you are describing. And most people say no the first time they hear a price anyway, so get that out of the way early and earn a fresh chance at yes with every new thing you add. What makes a price feel reasonable is anchoring, one of the most replicated findings in behavioral science. Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman demonstrated it in 1974 with a rigged wheel of fortune. Participants who watched it land on 10 estimated African countries made up about 25% of UN membership. Those who saw 65 guessed around 45%. A number they knew was random moved their answer by 20 points, which means if you do not set the anchor deliberately, something else will, and that something is usually the cheapest comparable thing your audience has ever seen. So connect your offer to a legitimately higher price point first, then step down in stages. People cannot evaluate numbers in a vacuum. They can only evaluate them against other numbers. Then the bonuses. And here is the part that sounds absurd until you understand it. A well-built presentation spends 2 to 3 times longer on the bonuses than on the core offer. By the time you reveal price, the audience has landed somewhere around maybe. Now watch what happens when you keep adding things at no extra cost. Every addition tips the scales through excitement rather than logic, which is the stronger force at the moment of decision. Compound after each reveal, restating the whole growing stack every time, and save the strongest for last. Most people lead with their best material because they are anxious about rejection. Comedians do not. You build to the payoff. Then the guarantee, and this is where I want to slow down, because the data underneath it changed how I think about selling education at all. Track logins on any course, and you will routinely find 10 to 20% of purchasers never log in more than once. And the research on open online courses tells the same story at scale. Katy Jordan's analysis of 221 massive open online courses found a median completion rate of 12.6%. And a 2019 study in Science covering 565 MIT and Harvard courses and over 12 million registrations found completion rates barely moved between 2014 and 2018, despite years of platform investment and instructional design improvement. That one stung when I first read it. The content in those courses is excellent. World-class instructors, professional production, rigorous design. And it changes almost nothing for most enrollees, because the format supplies no accountability, no consequence for stopping, and nobody noticing that you stopped. Add structure and the picture changes. Platform data from Ruzuku puts self-paced courses at 30 to 50% completion and cohort-based courses with live sessions at 50 to 80. The commercial conclusion is that a conditional guarantee requiring demonstrated engagement is usually safe because most buyers will not meet the conditions. But the conclusion I care about more is this. If completion for pure content sits in the low teens, then selling pure content to someone who genuinely needs the outcome is a bad deal for them, however good the content is. Cohorts, deadlines, community, and someone who notices when you go quiet are not upsells bolted onto a course. They are the difference between a purchase that works and one that does not. And that resolves the ethical discomfort I opened with. Telling someone that the information alone probably will not be enough for them is not manipulation. It is the single most accurate thing you can say about online learning. The last piece of the close is objections, and the move is to convert them into questions. An objection is a wall. A question is a request for help. Same content, completely different posture, and now you are a helpful person instead of an obstacle. It always comes back to time and money. On money, move from, can I afford this, to, am I willing to prioritize this? Because the first question is rarely the real one. And on time, the person sitting on your training has already proved they can find 90 minutes for something they care about. Now, I could stop there and you would have a solid presentation, but there is one place outside the session where most educators leave real money on the floor, and that is the replay. About half your registrants never attend live, which means half your audience never sees the offer unless you build one. They convert at a lower rate, but even at a quarter of the live rate, the extra volume can double a campaign. Analysis aggregating roughly 12,400 business-to-business webinars found replay-only converters accounted for 58% of webinar-sourced pipeline. 58%. So expire the page when the offer expires, and please edit the recording. Uploading the raw file is the laziest move in the funnel, and it is shockingly common. Let me ground all of this in a real person, because frameworks are easy to admire and hard to believe. Kat Norton teaches Microsoft Excel. She started posting short tutorial videos on TikTok in June of 2020 while working at a consulting firm, launched her first course that November, and quit her job in January 2021 when the course revenue passed her salary. She has since built Miss Excel into a business generating several $1 million a year. The relevant part is how she sells. She started running live trainings in April 2021. 2 of them that month produced her first 6-figure month, about $105,000. By October, her sessions were producing over $100,000 in a single day. In interviews, she has been direct that learning to sell, specifically through this format, was the pivotal skill, and that it came from working with someone who had a sales background rather than from instinct. Her format maps almost exactly onto the structure I just walked you through. 2 to 3 minutes establishing who she is. Roughly 45 minutes of genuine, in-depth Excel instruction. Then the offer. Music plays when people join. She asks attendees to bring their favorite drink. Her overhead was about $1,000 a month. I find that more persuasive than any 9-figure marketing case study because she teaches spreadsheet software, about as unglamorous a subject as exists, and it still worked. A large audience and good content produced real revenue. Adding live trainings changed the order of magnitude. So let me leave you with something honest rather than motivational. This framework has a lot of parts, and the natural response to a lot of parts is paralysis. So here is the compressed version in the order I would actually do it. Pick one narrow audience and one specific outcome you could deliver in 45 minutes. Break the path into 4 steps. Write the content section badly and too long. Write the pitch. Then build an introduction that establishes why anyone should listen, gets one written commitment, names the objections you know are coming, and teases 4 things you will reveal later. Drop in a transition, ship it, then run it, watch the chat, and find the exact moment you lost people. That last step is the only one that cannot be skipped or outsourced. Everything I have said today is a hypothesis until it meets an audience. The presentation you eventually run will barely resemble the one you first write, and that is not failure. That is the process working correctly. The thing I keep returning to is that none of this is really about selling. It is about the gap between explaining something and changing what someone does about it. Every teacher who has ever delivered a beautiful lecture to a room that then went home and changed nothing already knows that gap exists. Marketing has just been more honest about measuring it. If you teach something worth learning and your program genuinely helps people finish what they start, then getting better at this is not a compromise. It is how the work reaches the people who need it. So here is what I would like you to do this week. Do not build the whole thing. Just answer one sentence. By the end of my session, this specific person will achieve this specific result, and it will feel this specific way. Write that sentence, and you have already done the hardest part. The full written version, with all the sources and a few things I could not fit into audio, is up at bullishbooks.com. And I would love to know which part of this stops you. Is it the pitch itself, the pricing, or something else entirely? Tell me in the comments and let us work through it together. Thanks for spending this time with me. I am Lei. If this was useful, subscribe so you do not miss the next one, and I will see you soon.